Hello everyone, welcome to Inspected Goals, the pod that tries to improve our FPL play through a more analytical approach. Sam, we're back again.
We are back,
We are
conveniently after a good game week again for me anyway.
after a good game week, like clockwork. We love it. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, doing well. Enjoying a bit more sun this week.
Yeah.
Been disappointed by the football results in terms of non-FPL because of Preston this week. We did our classic thing of flirting with the playoffs and then we've lost our last two. But 2 points off the playoffs with 3 games to go, so that's still a bit of excitement.
I
And then
have.
FPL wise, doing well also last week, thankfully.
Nice. I have like zero knowledge of the championship. Was that expected for your team or not to get to this sort of position?
We're probably expected to finish mid-table in general, which is where we finished the last 6 or 7 seasons. But we just suddenly went on a run. We only lost one in about 11 matches. Suddenly won the 2 games over Easter, and then we were seventh on goal difference. So suddenly we were like, oh, we're very close to the playoffs with only 5 games to go. But then we've lost our last two. But even though we've lost our last two, we're still 2 points off the playoffs in
Mad.
11th, which is mad. So 6th to 11th, there's 2 points.
Wow.
Which is just
I was gonna
summarizes the
say,
league,
is it
really.
super close like it normally is? But you've just told us, yeah.
So it feels like it's extremely unlikely now, but ultimately, if we win our last 3 games, we'll probably be in the playoffs. So it's kind of technically feels like it's in our hands, but the chances of that happening are low. We play Blackburn, who are currently sixth, which is good because we've got that opportunity, but also they're probably a slightly better team than us. But at least it's nice to have something to be excited about because I don't know, we still often a mid-table, and it's by this stage in the season, it's just boring. Um, like for mid-table Premier League fans, it's just like if you know you're not going to get Europe or know you're not going to go down.
Are you going to
I don't know,
mention
teams.
beach? Is this the point where you bring the beach out?
Yeah, I'm on the beach as a fan normally. I'm off the beach now. Yeah, actually nervous on Saturdays.
Love that.
Yeah,
Love that.
how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. How was my game week? In real life, we're all good. There's nothing to talk about. I've got a boring life. You don't want to know about it. In in FPL, what did I do last week? I got 77 points. I don't know if that's great or
Good.
not, but it was basically Salah.
Yep.
I think most people probably had Watkins. So I think Salah and Watkins combined with the Haaland captain, which was the trio that did stuff for me. Everyone else pretty much did nothing. My biggest regret in recent weeks in FPL was the fact that I think I've talked about it before, but I had the extra money somehow, had a quite high team value, so I decided to get Isak over Solanke, despite liking Solanke a lot and having him in previous times. I just thought with that extra double for Newcastle, that the fact that I could afford it and get that move done early, because I think we've had the announcement today as well, haven't we, confirming the game week 36, which I think most people may look at Isak at that point. I was kind of ahead of the game. And it was optimal as per review over Solanke for me, simply because I could afford it. So I did it. Yeah, we always want more, don't we? Team scores fine, team did fine, but if I'd have gone Solanke over Isak, it would have been sort of world star over the last few, because he has really kicked into gear as old Dom Solanke.
I didn't think it'd be Solanke saving my season.
He did it before, to be fair. When I got him previously, I don't know. Did you get him previously?
This season,
Yeah.
I've not had him this season. I don't think until recently.
Okay. I got him.
Don't think.
He was pretty much dreadful at the start, wasn't he? And I think it was well, so were Bournemouth, but it's a combination of. He also got some like rogue injuries and just not turned up and stuff in the beginning of the season. Barely had any points, and then he was getting slated in the community at that point. And I think a few of us sort of got him because the fixtures were good, and he went on a lovely little run. Not anything fantastic. It was like 3 or 4 games, sort of 9-pointers and stuff. Like you've talked many times about, the value was there. That's what the point was. And then I think he got injured again or something, had to come out. But yeah, he was a fantastic buy every time I've had him. And I didn't get him this time, and I'm regretting it. But I have the opportunity to, because we are both on free hit, and
Yes,
he's one of the best buys this week, it looks like.
he is, and also just because of what you said about Isaac, just in general, because I was just going through FBref, like his numbers are crazy in terms of just underlying data this season. Obviously he's new to the league. The thing that probably holds him back a bit as an asset is just his minutes, isn't it? The fact he'll share some of them with Wilson. And Wilson's exactly the same, isn't he? They're so similar in that sense, in that they're not that similar in terms of players. There are some similarities, but in terms of when they play, they're brilliant. The issue is getting them to play. But with Isaac, he has had that injury this season, but when he's been playing regularly, he's been absolutely... He's such a good player. He's so good.
Yeah, his minutes have been reduced. Obviously, in those scenarios when it's a smaller sample, you have the opportunity to look better, don't you? Because he's done very well in the small amount of minutes he's had. But that was part of the reason of getting him. I just felt like, especially at the time, I'm not so sure now in terms of Wilson, because I think he is probably a bit of a factor we have to worry about. But when I got him, Wilson probably wasn't much of a factor. He's probably been a little bit unlucky. I think penalties are still up in the air, but Newcastle in general, like their XG generated for the season is really good. In home games, they're one of the top sides, and that's part of the reason why I think he is also a name we should be looking at the free hit. He's one of many players that are, I would say, extremely tempting, but are sort of hindered by the fact that we're not 100% sure in the minutes. There seems to be quite a lot in that bracket.
Yeah, he's sorry, excuse the noise. I'm just need to plug in my laptop. Need to plug in my laptop. Yeah, so I just checked his XG per 90 is 0.64, which is pretty mad.
It's pretty damn good, yeah.
And a team that good as well. And so I can completely see why you went from over Solanke, and can see why that would have been better for you if you've got the money for it. And despite everything you've just said about Solanke as well, in terms of he's good because he's good value, he regularly plays 90 minutes when he's fit, and he's on penalties, and that's why we like him. But even so, like, for him to get 15 points against Spurs is ludicrous. Like, that's just, yeah, it's a lot of luck. Like, I brought him into my team in 29 for that double, hoping he might get one return. He did. He managed to get a goal, which is great for a player of that value. But for this game week, that's just, for him to outscore Kane is crazy, but for him to outscore him by 13 points in that game is just a lot of luck. So I wouldn't kick yourself too much about it. We're plugged in.
Like moving house.
Yeah, I wouldn't kick yourself too much about it. It's just
one of those things. Ultimately,
it's just one of those things,
it doesn't matter, because I made my bed with Isak, and whoever scores more from the point that I chose, Isak or Solanke, from now to the end of the season, is pretty much a straight shootout, because the money shouldn't matter to me. Like, if it's not him and another player, that was the whole point of it. So whoever ends up scoring more points come the very end of the season will have been the right choice for me personally. And Isak's still got a chance of doing that.
I guess, yeah, it was very unlikely you would transfer him out, Isak, now. I would assume.
No, he'll be staying the whole season. I think maybe in 30, I think it's 37, 38. After 36, you can look at taking him out for like Havertz or someone, if I remember rightly. I don't even know if he'll be playing now under Lampard, but yeah, pretty much the whole season.
I was, just looking at our teams. Basically this week, if you had Haaland captain and Watkins, you did okay. You probably got a small red arrow or a grey arrow. If you had Salah, you then had the green arrow. But then you had a good week because you had Grealish. The difference is you had Grealish, I had Solanke, so there's like an 8-point difference there basically in the end. If you had like one player who returned outside of Watkins, Haaland and Salah, if you had those three plus one more, you had a really good week. And most people had like Raya or Kepa, who both conceded but got 5 and 6 points.
Yeah, there's a point.
Yeah. Just the second time Raya's done that recently, but the last time he got like 9 or 10 points or something silly, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he made 3 save points and 3 bonus or something.
Well, that's it. We were talking just before I clicked go live, but my original transfer was to bring Ederson in for Raya if Rashford hadn't got injured. I made the decision to take Rashford out for Grealish. So by playing Raya over Ederson and Grealish outscoring March, both are very marginal. It's debatable whether it's worth it. So I've scored a few extra points, but now I'm potentially a transfer behind. Well, I am a transfer behind because I'd have Ederson in my team ready, and also I'd have Rashford ready, whereas now I don't have either of those guys. So probably not worth it, but the short-term tiny gain is there. So we'll have to see what I'm going to do about that, because I genuinely didn't think Rashford would be back this close. I know the noises were there, and a lot of people took that opportunity to do it, but I made my transfer a little bit earlier just because of the price rises and stuff, rather than what I think the news sort of broke the next day that he looked like he potentially could be back or something. So
it was after it was like I think maybe the post-match interview after the Thursday night game for United.
Got it, yeah.
Where he said that he might, I think someone asked him would he be there ready for the Seville game, and he said, Seville or Sevilla? Sevilla. The place is Seville, yeah. Or whatever.
Whatever, we don't do pronunciation on this pod.
Severe problem. Yeah, anyway.
There's another clip for you of me shaking my head at you, Joe.
But it was after that game, wasn't it? And he said there was a chance, and now for those of you listening who don't know, he's on the bench tonight, Rashford, as is Shaw. And you were saying to me again just before we started recording, if they have, for example, a 2-goal or more lead in the second half, you think there's probably a good chance they just won't risk either of them, and
Yeah, I mean, it makes
because
sense,
there's no
right?
need to, is there? Yeah, yeah.
If by, I mean, I don't think it'll be an easy game like that, but you never know. So if they're suddenly 2-3 nil up, I don't see why you would bring them back on. I think they both had muscle injuries. I don't think they've actually. Have they actually? I don't think they've confirmed exactly what they had. But
No.
if it was a muscle injury, it does seem a little bit risky to me. But obviously, I'm not in. I haven't got the information. I'm guessing the medical guys there, I'm sure, will be in a much better position to determine what's needed for them. So we'll see. But I don't need to worry about him until 34. Really, could get him before that. But me and you, as I said right at the beginning, are on free hit. I appreciate there'll be quite a few people that may watch this and are not on free hit and are probably bored to tears with everyone talking about free hit. And are looking at other options and stuff. I apologise for that, but it is the most popular week, and we will briefly sort of mention some other bits, and feel free to put it in the chat if you want us to talk about non-free hit options.
Maybe a good place to start is to say, like, if you are making, say you've got 9 or 10 players for this week, and there's one player you like really want to prioritize getting in, like, who would that player be?
Yeah. I've got the fixtures up on the screen at the moment. We had the confirmation today of the game week 36 double for Brighton and Newcastle. Great work by all the predictors again. I think that was fairly obvious according to them, but to me it wouldn't have been obvious, so I take my hat off yet again that they're doing all this great work for us. I've got Ben Crellin's fixture ticker on the up on the screen there. I don't think they've officially announced 37 yet. That's why it's in orange, but it's it's pretty much certain now, isn't it? Because it's like the only place it can go, or something along those lines. So we have the full blueprint. We kind of had it already, but it's nice just to have it cemented in there. I think the main takeaways will be, I think they've announced like dates and stuff, and I don't know whether some bits can change still depending on Europe, but it's more to do with the close proximity of the games, I guess, and the fact that some teams are now progressing the Champions League, like Man City, that we'll have to worry about those things a bit later. But for us on free hit, that's the beauty. We can kind of ignore it for now.
Yeah, completely. And just glancing at that as well, like, the first thing I'd be thinking if I wasn't on free hit is just prioritise Liverpool players, because again, they've got a fixture this week, plus they've got the upcoming double in 34. The only other two teams who have that are West Ham and Fulham. So that would be the first thing I'd say, because there'll be very few people. Well, there may be some, but there'll be very few who are not free hitting who already have triple Liverpool. So that would be where I'd be looking straight away, is just target that Forest fixture and get an asset in that you want till the end of the season.
Yeah,
and also obviously Salah as well, because he's the best captain this week by a mile.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone's going to be brave enough to not go there, are they? With the Salah captain, I don't think there's any. I mean, I don't particularly see what reason you would do it aside from I'm 3 million and why the hell not? I just hope he blanks. But
things that if you just, like, you're right in terms of engaged players. Like, I definitely think that's the case. But if you just switch Saka and Salah's scores from the last game week, if Saka happened to brace and score his penalty, and Salah happened to blank and miss a penalty, for example, well, I reckon loads of people would be going Saka over Salah. It's because there's like a lot of people are having doubts about Saka. Like, I've seen free hit teams without Saka in it, which to me is mad.
No, but I love it. Don't discourage it. We love that. We love that sort of behaviour. Harry's in the chat asking about people starting. Yep, we're going to get onto that now, Harry. We're going to look at first of all, we've got the review free hit team, which I'm going to bring up here. So this is as per FPL review. This is the paid part of it, and there's a few settings that I've applied here which I think are extremely useful in just as particularly in a solo game week. So in the advanced options you can change bits and pieces around. Essentially, this draft that I've got on the screen takes away any bench weighting, so it values that as 0. I've negated all risk, so it doesn't take into account effective ownership. There's some players where it's so close, like 0.1 in it, where it will pick the player with high ownership just to sort of protect your rank. For example, Trippier. I've done away with that. I said I don't care about that. I'm on free hit. Go wild. There's other elements in it. It's got like a risk sensitivity in terms of minutes. I put everything basically down to 0 and just said, give me the pure EV, expected value, best 11 team. And this was at the time I took it. Bear in mind, as usual, all these things change as we get closer to the game week as more information comes in. The only thing I've adjusted is I've put Tony's minutes up, simply because he's still slightly low on review, because they expect that ban to come in at any point. But it seems fairly safe for now. Unless things change, then obviously we can adjust that.
Yeah,
So
it seems unlikely they'd announce a ban on a weekend.
yeah,
So if he's
hope
not
not.
banned by the deadline, you'd think he'll play. So you can
That
just
would
keep him
be
normal.
ridiculous, luck, wouldn't it? But if that happens, we've got so much money. Your first bench option can be like another superstar. So I don't think it would be that much of a problem. Yeah, I'll read it out just in case anyone's listening on the pod. So there won't be too many surprises in here because you've probably seen this team all over Twitter or very close to it. So we've got Johnston in goal from Palace. I think that's extremely common. You've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, Robertson and Gabriel at the back. So it's gone for the Arsenal defender and it's gone for Robertson at the back. That's where there's a bit of differentiation in the community, I think. We've got Salah, Saka, Odegaard. So no Martinelli. He's got Maddison in there. And then up front it's Watkins, Solanke and Tony. So 3 90-minute men on pens up top, I would say. Which looks pretty tasty. So that is what the computer is saying is the very best team. Now, what are your thoughts on this? Because part of it is it's got in game theory, I guess, in terms of if that's the best team and we swear by EV and we think the analytical approach is the right thing, why do we not just pick that team bang on and just put it in? Like, is there anything to encourage you to not go against the team? Like, what are your thought process? Because I'll be honest, I've considered just picking that team. Like, but there's almost like something deep down inside, I don't know if you have it as well, where you think you know better or you want to be a little bit spicy with it. Is it just because we've got the opportunity to do so, or like, do you think that's just unwise? I don't really know.
Good question. I think there's a couple of things. Is one of the reasons you might change it is because you might just adjust the minutes and have a different read there. And another reason is that we just know that review's not perfect. So no, it's probably our best guess. If you were to play FPL for 1,000 seasons, you would do extremely well. But you would, I think, when the difference between two players is like 0.1 EV in one game week, it's just a massive grey area. So if you just have an inkling one way, and there's just another reason you have, and you think there's possible something that review hasn't accounted for, or particularly something short term that's happened that maybe you think is going to have more of an impact than maybe long term data might suggest. That's where you might go somewhere different. I think another reason is, again, if the difference is like 0.1 EV between two players, and your rank is like 300k, and your aim is to finish in the top 50k, I think even if there's like a 0.1 difference, you just go for the player with the lower EV. In that case, that might be where you start to do that. This might be a big opportunity on free hit to do that. But yeah, I think when it's between players and it's absolutely minimal, I think that's where you just, things like going with your guts and having a read on a game on something that's changed short term, like a new manager coming in, or just a game you've watched where you think a player's getting into good positions, for example, but that doesn't show up in underlying stats. So that's where you might have a difference in opinion.
I completely agree. The word is variance, isn't it? Again, the word is there is. I mean, there are elements of what you said there, but there's also variance in any given game week. Literally anything can happen. It doesn't mean you just go wild and pick, literally anyone. But I think there's things are so close this week, and to read one game of football or one player's points is incredibly tough. This is always based on an average points, isn't it? So, although the one thing I will add is, like, if I go different from this team and I pick players and I don't know, for example, I don't go Tony, I go for someone else, and Tony scores well, I don't think I can really moan. That's the way I look at it. I think I've made that choice and I've gone for that other person because for whatever reason, I fancy them more. I want to take a little bit of risk, whatever, and then Tony outscores him. The only thing is I don't think I can particularly moan. I think, like, the blueprint is there, and if you want to follow the blueprint, it probably makes sense. That's the way I look at it, and anything you do outside of that, fine. The same way, if you overachieve and you sort of smash it, and it was by your own intuition and it played out, I think you can pat yourself on the back as well. I don't think you just completely ignore that, but I just think you can't really complain if you go against it. Like I'm, for example, probably not going to go Maddison. We're going to get to our drafts in a little while. I don't particularly favour him as a player. I think the fixture's very, very good, but I've come up with my own reasons why I don't want to pick him. Now, if he goes mad and scores, I've only got myself to blame as far as I'm concerned. Does that feel fair or not?
It feels fair, but I also do think it does work the other way. I think if you just go with the standard review team every single week, and even like on a free hit, and you put very little thought into it. You just log in, pick your team, and afterwards, in hindsight, you're thinking, oh, actually, yeah, that player did have a good fixture or whatever. Again, that's kind of like, you should own that. So I don't think like just going with the review team gives you like allowance to have no regrets, or to just say straight away, well, I was just unlucky. I think that works both ways, and there's just a bit of intuition because this review would disagree with someone else's model, like the Mikel Top Fan. His model will have different predicted points to this as well. Other people might have their own models or different ways they work out expected points. So I don't think it's quite as simple as this is our like absolute optimal team. And well, it is in terms of EV, it's optimal if we're using that word optimal with like an analytics definition. But we're not saying this is just like objectively the best team you can possibly pick. That's just ultimately there is opinion and there's different things you might pick up from watching football still. Like we don't think that doesn't exist at all. We're just maybe a bit skeptical about certain narratives starting because of that, or how much we actually think we can pick up compared to data being able to pick up. And predict the future, essentially.
I think the main talking points this week for me, you mentioned minutes being one of them. The turnaround between this game week and next game week is like 2 to 3 days for some of these teams, isn't it? And I know that, a lot of the players we're picking, I'm mainly talking about Arsenal and Liverpool players, I guess, here, have at least something to attempt to play for, certainly in Arsenal's case. But they have got options, or maybe their minutes might be reduced, I think, just because the fixtures are, for both of them, incredibly easy. And then Arsenal play City next. In fact, I'm going to bring up the rest. Probably quite small on the screen, I can barely see it myself, but I think they play 2 or 3 days later versus Man City.
I think it's 5 days later, actually, yeah, because they play Friday.
Oh, is it 5 days? Oh, of course it is, yeah, Friday, Saturday, yeah.
They've actually, I think that's being overplayed by a lot of people in terms of Arsenal rotation. They've got they've had a 5-game break before this game. A 5-day break, sorry, Sunday to Friday. They've got another 5 days. So, like, even though we're probably, sometimes we get early team news through like it being leaked on Twitter, and sometimes we know that's reliable if we know the source. That could be a massive advantage on Friday if suddenly, 15 minutes before the deadline, we suddenly know, for example, something random like Saka's benched, and you can then play Trossard and you've got one up if Trossard holds on those people who aren't aware of that. But I think it's extremely unlikely we'll get that this week. I think Arsenal will just play their best team, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think there was some comments by Arteta. The 5-day thing, now I'm seeing it, that probably makes me feel a little bit at ease. But I guess it's still the fact that you probably want your freshest team and you don't want to protect people from you don't want people to actually get injured in the game. So if they're 3-4-0 up, I think we've seen it from City. Maybe they start reducing people. Obviously, at that point, they may have loads of points anyway. So, I don't know. Maybe the minutes are a little bit managed, I guess you could say. Yeah,
they'll do that anyway. But the fact they've then got City next is like the worst time possible to get an injury. So if they're 3-0 up and it's the 60th minute, they're way more likely to just take Saka off, I think, because he could pick up an injury in any game, but him picking up an injury in this game is like the worst possible scenario.
Imagine the worst possible Gabriel. Time in the season. Like, I don't think they're going to manage him at all. They don't want to scaremonger him, but they've already got Holding next to him. And then if they lose Gabriel, that would be catastrophic, wouldn't it? I would have thought. But anyway.
Gabriel or Saliba. Yeah. Another thing I like about this free hit is that although like you will see a lot of teams that are similar, that's the same on any free hit. And I actually think what's quite good about this is the two main teams, Liverpool and Arsenal, there is actually quite a lot of ways to
cover them.
Directions you can go in. Yeah, well, at least two main directions for both of them. So most people will have Salah, Trent and Saka a lot, but the other half of those two teams, you will see a lot of variation. And not just that you'll see loads of variation, but you'll see loads of variation within like the analytics community, for example, because you can choose 6 of those, another 3 players, and actually their EV will be really similar, depending on what that gets the rest of your team. So, for example, like Gabriel's great this week, and like he was in the optimal team there, I think you showed.
Yeah.
Based on the settings you had. If you have Gabriel, suddenly you're losing out on Martinelli or Odegaard or Jesus, for example, who have got really high EV. So I think there's lots of different options, and it's not a particularly boring free hit week, I don't think.
No.
I think it's the same, and people just forget every time that most free hits, active players have 7 or 8 players the same. That's pretty standard.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen, isn't it?
The variance between, it's almost like 2 separate groups. Like if you're on free hit and you're not on free hit, or even your general community and you don't have like hardly any players this week, like you should probably get beaten by quite a considerable amount. But the variance in between those that are free hitting is going to be quite different just because of that reason alone, isn't it? The Arsenal and Liverpool game, depending on your 3 options for each one. It could be quite similar, but it also could be crazy different. You never know. So yeah, you were saying about not beating yourself up. I mean, I'm going back and forward like many are, on Robertson or maybe Gakpo, which is in the chat. And there's barely anything in it, but the temptation is to really cover the teams offensively, I think, more than defensively, just because they both feel like fixtures where they could go crazy and hit 5 or 6 goals. There's not to say that Gabriel can't score from a corner and it'd be 1-0 and he get a monster haul from that. He absolutely could do that, but if you get sort of the striker in say Gakpo, who's playing as a midfielder versus arguably the worst team in the league, or at least one of them in Forest, you feel like the potential there is for 2 or 3 goals. So it's tricky. I think you mentioned the Arsenal one. I feel slightly more secure about them. With Liverpool, I don't really know what's your feeling, because they've obviously got so many forwards now in all the positions. I think we can be fairly safe in terms of Salah, but they've just got so many options now for those other 2 positions. I think at the moment with Gakpo and Jota, they've been performing so well that the general sort of feel that I've seen out there is that those guys will just start the game again. I don't know. It feels like they have to give the minutes to the other guys. They're not in any other competitions, are they?
Yeah, I'm not as confident on that as most people. I don't think.
I just don't know. That's the problem.
For me, it's partly that I just think Nunes is so good. I think he's a ridiculously good player, and he was favoured so much beforehand. And Klopp said nothing about him, since he's come back from international duty and he had that injury. I think it was I think it was something random, like a cut, or like a gash he had in his ankle. Since he's come back from that, his minutes have been really managed. He's had 1 rest, then he started, but came off early, then he was rested again. And there's just part of me, in the back of my mind, thinking, are they just trying to manage him until the end of the season? And for all we know, that might be over now and he might be ready for another start. I think a lot of people have just assuming it's going to be the same front 3, and that they could be right. And I would predict it would be the same front 3, but I'm a bit more nervous about one of those players being rested for Nunes than most. I think, but just purely because I think Nunes is so good that if he's fully fit, I just always expect him to start.
But he hasn't been, has he?
No, he hasn't. Well, he hasn't started 2 out of the last 3. I just wouldn't be surprised at all if he came back in. But for maybe most people, they think that's a 10% chance. I maybe think it's a 25% chance, for example. But that little just bit of doubt makes a difference. And it's the same with again, the thing that makes me nervous about having Gakpo again is just I just know how Jota, just how good he is. He scored 16 goals or something last season. Just a player of that quality. I just wouldn't be that surprised if it was Salah, Nunes, and Jota.
Well, I think there's multiple ways you can look at it, isn't it? That's why I think you can look at it that the fixture's easy enough where they don't have to play if you think it's their best team, or certainly a team that's versus harder opponents. Jota's good at pressing. Gakpo obviously plays more of a Firmino role. It's more a team setup, I would say. If you were sort of Pep Guardiola and picking your players based on your opponent, it feels like a team you would play in tougher fixtures. Whereas Nunes feels like the player you could utilise in a game like this. But then you can look at it the other way and say, okay, he normally, Klopp works in a system with this sort of red flag system where he plays his best players, and then that there's games close proximity, and then he'll rest quite a few names in one game. That seems to be his kind of general mantra that he'll do. Doesn't mean he'll necessarily do it here, but there's been a big enough gap, I think, where you could say, well, he'll play his best team, essentially Gakpo and Jota at the moment, it looks like, and then because the game is so close for West Ham, that will be the game that he then changes the front line in. So you could look at it either way, and I don't think you can say for sure either way, right? I'm certainly not clued up enough to know. So that's the thing that puts me off. I really want to go Gakpo, but I probably can only blame myself if I pick him and then he's benched. I knew it's a possibility. Doesn't mean it should put you off though. We've discussed it. It is down to you if you want to pick him and go for it. And if he starts and gets a hat trick, you'll pat yourself on the back. Fantastic. But you just have to be open to the option that it could go the other way, and then you probably beat yourself up that you haven't picked a 90-minute man, or like a Maddison or something like that instead of him, which is so tough.
For me, it's a combination of that, of having just slightly more doubt, about Gakpo starting, even though I still think it's likely he will. That little bit makes a big difference, and then also just the early subs. Like ultimately, they've got three players on the pitch. Salah nearly always comes off later than the other two, and you've got three players to replace those three players.
They'll get subbed early, won't they? I think that's general.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know whether it's a massive issue because a lot of people are in that book. You could say that for the Arsenal players as well, and
not to the same extent though. I don't think.
Maybe not, but you could sort of expect 70 to 80 for most of the options. Maybe Liverpool is slightly less than that, and that's probably more than enough versus the opponents that they've got. You're certainly not going to like. I wouldn't pick Eze because he's getting 90 over, say, Odegaard, who I think maybe gets 75. Like personally, I mean, Eze's a fantastic option, but I wouldn't do that. But yeah, it's just that worry that I don't know. Say they're 3-4-0 up, Arsenal versus Southampton. Jesus is only just back from an injury. I think he's one that I'd really like to go for, but I think he could quite easily come off at 60, 65 minutes anyway, regardless of the fact that the game is 5 days away, just because Trossard's a great player and he needs minutes as well. That's the worry. And yeah, there's going to be some brutal swings because I think a lot of us want these players. We want like Isak, Jesus, players like that probably got slightly limited minutes, Gakpo, and we may be swayed away from going with them and then just watch them brutally score like massive amounts of points. But
yeah, absolutely.
What can you do?
But I mean, what you said, I saw some odds today of like a return, and for like Trent, I think for Trent and Robertson, like the chances of a return were like maybe between 65 and 75%, somewhere there. Maybe would have been higher for Trent. So you've got more chance of a return if you include a clean sheet in that from Robertson. So yeah, it's that ceiling thing, isn't it? Like in general, there's more chance you get something from Robertson, but Gakpo could score a hat trick. Robertson's not going to get you 20 points.
Stuart's saying in the chat there, Jesus could brace in 60 minutes. Absolutely. Like, I'm not taking that away. His XG in the games he's been involved in recently is really good. It's like close to 1, I think, or around 1 in nearly every game in those limited minutes. Like, if we get the leak, like Sam says, that Jesus is starting, even though I know that he's probably likely to come off just simply because they've got forward options and that's what's been happening in every game, I'd still be very, very tempted to go with him because I think he's far more likely to score a goal than Odegaard.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is if you're going to do that, make that decision before you see the leak, so you don't see a leak and then panic and think, "Oh, do I get him?" just have a draft ready, or just decide 100% beforehand. If I see you starting, am I going to commit to it or not?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But there is still that thing in me that I still just love these 90-minute men with penalties. Like Jesus is a fantastic pick, but if I think he gets 70, we now know that he doesn't have penalties because Arteta confirmed. I think it was slightly up in the air that maybe Saka could pass him Jesus. He's come out and said that's not the case.
Yeah, he said something like, "I'll give the ball." He said like, "I'll go onto the pitch myself and give him the ball" or something.
Oh, fair play.
Something like that. If he gets a penalty, yeah. Couldn't have been more definite that Saka's on penalties.
I love that. Some straight information for once. It's great. Rather than messing around. Should we bring up our own drafts then? Because we've got them here, and we can kind of talk through. Well, we've been talking through some of the bits and pieces anyway, but why you've decided certain areas. So I'll bring your one up first, Sam, which is very close to the optimal one that I've got from review, to be honest. In fact, I think there's only maybe 2 players different. 2
players different, yeah. In terms of starting 11, there's 2 players different. And this is actually, so you can just see the starting 11 there, but actually the first sub is Solanke. So at the moment, my team, for anyone listening, is the same team that Luke read out about 20 minutes ago. That's the review optimal team. But this team has Trippier and Robertson instead of Gabriel and I can't remember now.
It had Robertson as well.
It's just Trippier instead of Gabriel.
Yeah.
Trippier instead of Gabriel and Ødegaard instead of Ødegaard or Martinelli instead of Solanke, basically.
Yeah, Martinelli instead of Solanke. So you've got Martinelli instead of Solanke, and you've got Trippier instead of Gabriel. So you've switched your Arsenal defender to an attacker, essentially.
Basically, and then do you know what the reason is? Like, I think the chances of an Arsenal clean sheet are likely, but when I ran this through review, the difference in EV was like basically one point in EV, and I felt very happy with this team. And there's partly that I would be choosing between Ødegaard and Martinelli, and I hate making that decision. So as part of that, I can have both is quite nice. And I know that's not logical. I should just commit to one. But I just love the idea of having 3 attackers. For me, that's more exciting. And I just, like you said before, it's about that upside. Although I know Gabriel is more likely to get a return probably than like any of these players, any of Ødegaard or Martinelli individually. I could just see a haul easily from any of those 2 players, Ødegaard or Martinelli. So I wanted to have both of them. And I also just think Trippier is a really good pick this week. I think he's, I'll have a quick look now, but in terms of defenders this week, if you look at EV, he is 8th, and that's just behind all the players above him are Arsenal and Liverpool players. So Trippier is a great pick this week. It's not just about trying to hold rank and trying to like defend against his ownership. He's on like so many set pieces. He plays near to 90 minutes. And there's like a decent chance of a clean sheet. They're probably the 4th favourites for a clean sheet if you look at the market odds. So I like Trippier as well. And then the other big decision is basically with this team, do I start Solanke or Maddison? That's my kind of main decision at the moment.
Okay.
And,
Spurs are kind of
moment,
patched up at the moment at the back as well, aren't they? Now, I know that review will take these things into account, but it obviously has got a system in place where it doesn't overvalue such things like we do. But you could say that maybe there is value in that. You know, they've got some of their players out injured. I think I even heard James on Planet FPL say potentially they might play with a back 4 because of the system, because of the amount of players they've got injured, which, you know, you never know what could happen from that. That could suddenly work wonders for them. It could be dreadful. I mean, it sounds dreadful with the likes of Perisic and Porro potentially at fullback. That doesn't sound very good to me, but I think Trippier is a great option this week as well. To be fair, he is in a lot of the. If you eliminate the risk part and bring it back to around 0, then Trippier starts to appear in the FPL review team. So the EV is very close, like you said already. One thing I'll ask you. Go on.
Sorry, mate. Go on. I was just going to say a lot of the reasoning I've given there is like quite fluffy, but when the EV is like that close, like you could take this team and swap Martinelli and Trippier for Gabriel and Solanke up front, for example, and I'd also be really happy with it.
Yeah.
And I've absolutely no idea which one will score more points. No. I just slightly fancy this.
Our benches are definitely scoring points again this week. That's all I know. What I'll say is, why have you picked the 3 Arsenal mids over Jesus then? Saka, I'm just going to eliminate because I'm with you. I don't think it's even debatable. I think you just have him. Martinelli they've left out in review and gone for Ødegaard. I think that's minutes based more than anything else, personally. But why have you picked that over Jesus? Because Jesus has obviously got higher XG than the likes of Ødegaard and is more likely to score a goal. I know they're different positions, but you could quite easily in this setup have Jesus as your 3rd forward, couldn't you? And then have like Pereira on the bench or something like that. Yeah, I could easily just bring in Jesus for Solanke and then bench Maddison, for example, or switch Maddison to Pereira to afford it. Yeah, you'd have to. I'll say you'd have to take out the other Arsenal, otherwise you have 4, and that's cheating, mate.
You're right. The reasoning is it's just a few little things. So I think they're all good options. And then with the midfielders, you've got the extra clean sheet point. You got the extra point for a goal, and it's the fact that Trossard could come off the bench as well for Ødegaard or Martinelli. We've seen them both subbed early as well. I think Ødegaard's minutes are slightly better, but either of them could go off early. Whereas I think Jesus is like he definitely will be subbed early at some point, in my opinion.
Martinelli and Jesus are most at risk for Trossard, I think.
It's just minutes. Yeah.
Okay. It almost feels like if you've got the triple midfield from Arsenal and they do keep a clean sheet, you've got half a clean sheet point there as well. I don't like. It shouldn't really matter, but you've almost covered a little bit of a clean sheet there.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, most people will have 2 of those points anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't think there'll be many people on double Arsenal defence. But yeah, it's just like, to be honest, mate, it's similar to what I said before. Like I could, again, I can't say confidently whether Jesus or Ødegaard will score more points or Jesus or Martinelli. I just slightly prefer Martinelli, and it's like, just think there's more chance that you see like a really early Jesus sub. If, for example, they were like 4-0 up, for example, because of that Man City game. If he's such a key player, when he is involved, he changes the way they play so much.
It certainly feels the more fun, vibey pick to go with Jesus, simply because we probably haven't had the opportunity to own him, like apart from the very beginning of the season, and ultimately he is the striker. Like, so I can completely get behind that. And
so I mean, I've given my reasons, but again, I don't feel that passionate either way.
No.
Like, I think there's lots of good reasons for either, and that's what I feel like about a lot of these decisions. Really, there's just there's a few there like Trent, Saka, Salah, Tony, and Watkins. And Johnson I haven't even considered moving out. So
what about Tony? Because I see he's kind of like a little bit decisive, but he hasn't really been doing that well. I know he missed a penalty recently. And I say it's more about the fact that Villa look particularly good at the moment as well. Is that factored in like at all? Clearly not, because he's in your team. You just, if he's there, you think he's a good pick, you've got him. But does it play on your mind at all, any of those things? Because I think it does for other people.
Maybe a little bit. He scored 18 goals this season already. He's just he's a monster of a player. I just love him.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's mad to think like a couple of seasons ago there was a season where I think Mane, Salah, and Aubameyang shared the golden boot, and they all scored 19. He's one goal behind that already. Like 18 goals in the Premier League season is embarrassing. I don't know what happened that season. Lots of goals spread around teams. I just absolutely love him as a player, and it's the fact he's on penalties, and I appreciate Solanke's on penalties as well. I just feel more comfortable starting Tony, and I guess it's just so close that it's just my read on it. I think that I can just see that Brentford Villa game being really high scoring and exciting. So I'm happy to have two strikers from that game. I don't feel massively strongly on it either way. I think it's hard to call.
Fair play.
Yeah, honestly, I think a lot of the decisions are that close. I know it's such a boring answer, but that's where I'm at. But Tony, I just think he's a great player. I just feel slightly more confident in him than Solanke. But I do feel a little bit. I've just got 15 points from Solanke at like 0.5% EO, so I do feel a bit disrespectful benching him after that. It's a bit of a power move.
I can understand that.
Just keeping him humble.
Making him learn. Yeah, I've just brought up my free hit team. Again, I think me and Sam can both caveat this. We're not 100% sure we'll go with these options. It's surely likely to change as we get closer to the deadline. It is for me anyway. These are just the ones I've got at the moment in my team. So my difference is that I've got from you really. I've gone for White over Gabriel. I've had Gabriel all season, so I think it's more to do with the fact that I wanted to give White a go. I think with Tomiyasu out injured, he becomes a better option because you can not be sure, but I think there has been times in the season where he's come off pre-60, which has affected him as an option. I don't think that's going to happen now. It's also the fact that he has become a pretty good attacking fullback. Like he has been he's been picking up points. It's not just affected by the fact that he has picked up the points. It's the fact that he's been in the right positions. He has been getting forward and he has been on the back post in attack and stuff. And I just feel Southampton, they're the kind of opponent where the fullbacks are going to be pushed right up the pitch. Zinchenko, I know he tucks in if he was available. I think there's high doubt on him at the moment, but I just think in general, Tierney and White are going to be further up the pitch than you expect in most games. And although an Arsenal midfielder could happen for me instead, I kind of like the option. I feel like he could quite easily get an assist in the game and therefore just hit like a 9-pointer. So I've gone with him, but you say, it's barely anything in it. In midfield, I've got Martinelli, Salah, Saka, and Gakpo. So he's the rather than Robertson pick. I've gone for him. We've already talked about him a little bit. I don't know whether that will stick. I think I'm kind of hoping that we get some sort of leak or people convince me that he's going to be in the team. If I bottle it, then Robertson will revert into midfield, into defence instead of White, and then I'll probably just bring in Odegaard in midfield, which feels kind of boring, but it probably makes sense. I mean, Robertson and Odegaard, when you say it out loud, feels a lot more secure than White and Gakpo to me. But I don't know. Yeah.
I think, well, firstly, I would say I just much prefer Gabriel to White. White, it's just I just think 6 points for a defensive goal is just so overpowered. It's just absolutely huge.
White can score them too. That's my point. I think Gabriel from set pieces is an absolute threat, but I think White from open play.
Is he actually a threat at goals though? Or he just happened to score a couple recently?
No, I haven't looked at the stats. I'll be honest, but just from watching the games, I have seen him in and around the area and coming in at the back post, like I say, quite often from open play.
Sure, yeah. So not just putting the ball in the box, but getting in the box as well.
Yeah. Gabriel, you are relying on a set piece, and to be fair, he is the target of set pieces. He's an absolute menace as well. So
he's actually silly, Gabriel, for a defender.
Yeah, I can only blame myself if Gabriel scores the goal and White doesn't. I'll come back to that again. Gabriel is the obvious pick. It's kind of that part of me that just wants to be a little bit different, and there isn't really any logical sense in it. But the amount of variance we get in one game we whistle about is just mad. So I don't think you can. Yeah, you can. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, isn't it? I think they're both pretty damn good options, so I'm going to go for him, probably.
Yeah.
Up front, my only difference is to have Isak instead of Tony. So I've got Solanke and Watkins. Nice. Starting Solanke, actually. I don't think you were you? No.
No, it was Maddison instead of Solanke. Yeah.
And I've got Isak.
Yeah.
I've already got Isak in my team, and I feel a little bit like hard done by. So I think like that's part of it. I want him in my team. I'm not. He's similar to Gakpo when we don't know for sure he starts. So if he gets benched, I'm taking that chance. He could even come off at 74 Wilson, or something like that. So maybe limited minutes. He may not even have penalties if they both play together, which I suppose could happen, and Wilson maybe could take them. So I don't know, but it's the whole fact that Newcastle's team at home are just really, really good, and they're one of the best teams in the league. So it's kind of like I'm picking a striker of one of the best teams in the league in a good fixture at the moment. I think Spurs, and we've just talked about it, a little bit patched up. So it feels like a little bit of a difference that a lot of people won't go for. Like I kind of prefer him to Tony as a result, so that's why I'm tempted to go by it. But probably me being silly.
And he's on penalties as well.
He might be. Probably is.
Oh really? What? So if is there another player on the pitch who takes?
Well, Wilson.
Oh, I see. But they're not regularly on the pitch together, or are they sometimes?
Well, they have been. Yeah,
they've moved out to the wing.
Yeah, when they've needed to win games recently, they've played them both together. But so when they're both on the pitch together, we haven't actually seen who takes them.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think it's a great option, and similarly to what you said about Jesus, I'm exactly the same with Isaac. If I knew 100% Isaac was starting, I think I'd have him actually. Yeah, I think again based on looking at the goal scoring odds and just looking at his EV, I've not actually moved his X-mins about, but I imagine if we move them up to like 80, for example,
he becomes optimal.
It would become a really, really good option. So like again, if I knew he was starting, I probably would, but I'm just not willing to risk it. But I think I think that's the kind of thing where maybe partly does overall rank does come into it, and I know that maybe doesn't make that much sense because you're actually ahead of me, but also just the way you play and like your style of play just comes into it. Whether just how risky you're feeling, basically.
Yeah, I mean my style of play, like I've said multiple times in here, is more on expected minutes of players. Like I don't personally think that I risk players in terms of just on a whim. I think I do it based on their minutes. So for me, if I think Isak, or I hope I should say that Isak gets more minutes than the crowd does, then as we can see on FPL Review, he becomes optimal. So my punt is in the fact that he will play enough minutes. Sure. And that's the same goes for Gakpo. I think if you raise his minutes right up and you've got the Liverpool striker who is a midfielder in FPL in a game like this, he suddenly becomes an extremely good option. But I do know that both are big risks. So ultimately though, I think the way I look at it is if I look at everyone else who's not on free hit, hopefully I beat them, and versus all the people I want to compete with, although it makes sense just to go for the maximum amount of points, I also this is one of the few game weeks left now before the end of the season where I can differentiate a little bit, and that's where it's kind of like the free risk of Gakpo and Isak versus like an Odegaard and a Tony. So willing to take it on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, so with Isaac, for example, let's say you think if he starts, he'll play like 80 minutes plus or about 80 minutes, but you think there's like a 25% chance he won't play, rather than having his X-mins at like 65 to 70, you just take the gamble on the fact, I think he's going to start, I'm going to commit to that. And just because if he does, then he's optimal. So you're just gambling on the minutes. Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
I like that, and I mean, I think that makes sense, and I completely agree with you. If that's the way you're going to play, because I think if he starts, I'll kind of like wish I had him. And
and I will beat myself up when Tony gets a hat trick.
Scores four. I think he's going to score 4.
Oh, actually. 4. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, 4. And we've not even discussed keepers because I think Johnson is just a really easy pick. I just wouldn't bother looking elsewhere. Because, well, for me personally, with keepers, I would just go based on the clean sheet odds or just on the EV. And the only keepers above are Arsenal and Liverpool keepers who you want to use up their spaces on outfield players. So I just think he's a really easy pick.
Yeah. Is there any cheeky differentials out there that you can think of that you would like to go? Like, not necessarily even review, just gut feels. Because I could throw one at you. I think Rodrigo from Leeds is something out there that no one's really spoken about. Probably for good reason, but I don't know. I just love my midfielders on penalties that are potentially playing up front, and Rodrigo. I think Bamford's a big doubt for the game, playing away to Fulham, whose expected goals conceded is bad for the whole season. Like they've outperformed what that is. So I think there's like a feeling in the community that they're better than they are in that area. So I feel like he's one. These are all players though that we're just never really going to pick on our team. I'm just never going to pick him.
Yeah,
but I'm just
that's the thing.
I'm just going to I think I tweeted about it earlier. Like I can pick this punt and talk about it, but there's no chance I'm ever going for the person. And
you
just have to watch it. Sometimes you just have to watch these things go by. Like there's also just an equal chance he's just a terrible pick. So not going to go.
Even with like better options than Rodrigo, like a Palace midfielder, like Eze and Elise, like yeah, they're good picks, but ultimately, I know there will be people that own them, and they're probably quite highly owned actually on free hits. But from my point of view, from like an analytical point of view, they just don't show up in any like optimal teams. So
Pereira does.
So I've just not.
What do you think about him?
Sorry, I meant Palace players.
Oh yeah. No. Eze was showing in some to begin with.
Was he okay?
Yeah.
I've not even considered them. Don't know, maybe that's silly, but
well, Everton are dreadful. That's the thing, and I think the narrative is they're also trying to attack in games, which is quite strange. Playing with a high line, and obviously Palace are in incredible form. But yeah. I just don't put enough value on the short term of that, and I think you're the same, right? We just think that maybe it's more of a blip almost that they're doing so well than anything. Like maybe that's to discredit it. I don't doubt. I think Eze's a great pick, but I just can't see me picking a player like that over the options we've discussed. Like so that's why it's just not an option for me. But I could easily see him scoring a lot of points.
Yeah, like he could. Yeah, it's like your tweet said. Like anyone could. Anyone could score a lot of points.
Yeah, literally dreadful. Like dreadful content out there. Everyone's like, oh, anyone can score a point, but it is true. So good luck. Alex Meeker in the chat saying, surely Tony is a better pick than Solanke, but I would be more tempted by Maddison for Gakpo, Robert for White, and Solanke to Jesus, and Isak to Tony. Yeah, I mean, Tony, according to review, is a better pick than Solanke, I think. Very just about.
No. And with the default X-Men, Solanke's, if you move Tony's X-Men's up to 85, Solanke's still just ahead by 0.1.
Oh, is he? Okay. Well, I can see it in front of me. Yeah, but what I've got here on Solanke on 5.5. And where's Tony? I did adjust it. He's on 4.5 as well. That's him at 90 minutes. Sorry, 5.5. 4.6. Ignore me, I'm reading his price. Solanke's on 4.6, Tony's on 4.5, which is exactly what you said before, isn't it? 0.1 difference.
Yeah.
I don't know why I say surely. I mean, he has been better all season, but I think Solanke's... I mean, a lot of people like the form thing, right? Solanke's been firing him in. I think he's top for like shots in the box, everything over the last few games, over short samples. Not that should really affect us, but...
and his XG for the season, Solanke, per 90 is 0.3, which really isn't that bad.
It's fine.
For a player of that value, yeah, it's absolutely fine. And I know on this free hit, value is not the key thing. But yeah, it's the 90 minutes thing, it's the penalties thing. It can, like, he is a good pick this week, yeah, for sure.
West Ham are playing in Europe, aren't they, as well? So I think if you have any waiting on that and they play a Thursday night, potentially it can go to extra time, I think. 120 minutes.
Just have a quick look at their team, actually. Because again, one player I put in my team, this is before I'd looked at review, was Bowen straight away, and then I kind of gradually realised, he's not on penalties, and actually his data's not good this season at all, and that's quite a long-term sample size now with where we're up to this season. And it's not one of those where actually we've got loads of long-term data before that where he's exceptional. It was just last season particularly he was really good. I think
it's a fine pump, but the fact he's not on penalties just makes me think that I would just go for Pereira over him, or Rodrigo, or someone like that, just because...
You really don't like Maddison, do you, Lee?
No, I mean, he's fine, but again, if Maddison had penalties, which I don't even know for sure that he doesn't have them, like he could, I think he's at least in the conversation, depending on who's on the pitch.
Yeah. What's he called? Tielemans has taken them.
Tielemans has in the past. Obviously, Vardy's on the pitch. Iheanacho's taken them. Yeah.
But there's no guarantee they'll be on the pitch. Yeah.
No, and you could argue Maddison's grown as a player, different manager. Like, there's all sorts of factors. I don't think we can say for sure. That would be annoying if Maddison suddenly took them and I didn't have him. But yeah.
Yep. And with West Ham, it's Ben Rama on penalties. He's starting tonight. So is Bowen. Just had a quick
look. The team sheet come out? Okay.
Yeah. I couldn't find it at first, and I remembered there's a third European competition. I was looking at the Europa League. Well, where are they?
Okay, so I think
Yeah.
that maybe plays into it a little bit. I mean, West Ham generally don't rotate their team too much, and if they go along in this competition, I suppose you could argue that they'll be a little bit jaded. But I don't know. You can look at it so many different ways. You can build our own narratives, and I've heard it on lots of the pods I've listened to, and this is why we try to cut through that. And we're all sort of slightly guilty of it. You could say that there's an argument with Bournemouth that in a game like this, where West Ham will, I mean, they've been notorious all season for it. They give up possession, so they're going to. I wouldn't see that changes. They will probably allow Bournemouth to have a lot of the ball and say, we'll try and beat us. And I don't think that's particularly Bournemouth's game. Bournemouth are not used to that. So you could argue that will make it tough for Bournemouth to beat West Ham. And if anything, if they try to do that, West Ham will then be able to play their game and counter. Like, you can go so many different ways on that. And that's why I just think, well, I look at the EV, and Solanke's EV looks good, so I'll put him in. But, if you're able to read that, then fantastic.
Something that's interesting, I've just noticed. So Benrahma's on penalties. Say tonight, West Ham winning comfortably, and he comes off at like 55 minutes. In terms of his EV, like I just boosted it there to 80, and he's suddenly up to 4.2 EV, which is pretty good. And actually looking at his past minutes as well, he tends to either come off the bench or play 90 generally, or 80 plus. So like that might be like a nice punt for some people, because he's on penalties, and that just shows the value in it, doesn't it? But I just wouldn't be confident enough to do it personally.
No, I think
even if he comes up early tonight, it's just too much of a risk.
Agreed. Is there any questions we had on Twitter? I don't think we put a tweet out, did we? If anyone on the chat wants to ask any questions, we can do it, because we're almost at an hour yet, and I'm conscious we banged on about free hits. In fact, while people are thinking about doing that, shall I bring up the grass we've got for the players for the rest of the season? Because there are people that are not on free hit. We've got to look after them too a little bit.
Yeah. So we have got a few questions, but let's go through that first.
Okay. You ready them, and I shall briefly talk through these. I've brought up on the screen goalkeepers. It should be fairly self-explanatory, but if you're on the pod, you probably want to watch the video. But I shall try my best. Essentially, it's the goalkeepers that are best according to review from now till the end of the season in terms of their expected points. I don't think we've adjusted any minutes or anything on these, so it's just with default settings. And it's got Edison at the top, just slightly. Steele 0.1 behind him. He's got an extra game. And then Alisson, Pope and De Gea. So those are probably the goalkeepers if you need to make a change. I don't think anyone will be looking to do that at the moment, but I suppose you potentially could have someone blanking. Move on to defenders. I'm not going to read them all out. Probably best to come and watch it. But Trent Alexander right at the top. I don't think that's a surprise. Extra games. Always favoured by review in general, to be fair, but the quality of the games looks good. And I suppose you can even factor in now he looks to be playing in a slight positional tweak, which seems to be doing some favours, at least defensively. I mean, that could be skewed a bit because the games have also been good as well, right? But I think he's clearly the best defender to buy from now to the end of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is particularly helpful because there will be some people who have no free hit left, who had a different strategy, who used it in 28, for example, who maybe used their wildcard earlier or whatever. Particularly people who are newer to playing FPL, who maybe like at the beginning of the season, weren't into it at all, have suddenly got gradually more into it, but then by the time they're really invested, they've used all their chips. So those kind of people, like this kind of data is useful for, and just in general to have an idea of the big picture. So, but again, if you're not free hitting this week without a wild card left, particularly, I would Trent would be one of the other players. I just massively prioritise him and Salah, basically.
Yeah, I think Dunk as well as Stupin and the Brighton picks for the extra games. It's all obvious stuff. There's nothing groundbreaking here, and it is also a very viable strategy, depending on your team to free hit in 34 instead, so I'm not poo-pooing that by any means.
Yeah.
Midfielders we moved on to. Salah's bang at the top by a ridiculous amount. That was part of the reason why I took the hit to get him in early, and although I got rewarded this week, I feel like I've been a little bit let down with some of these crazy games that he's had before that as well that I didn't get rewarded in. Fernandes is still right up there. The one thing I'll point out is Rashford's kind of mid-table, but his expected minutes are at 20 at the moment. That's simply because we don't 100% know he's back. When you boost that up, I imagine he will jump to second behind Salah. If Fernandes is at 38, then he's probably going to be around that or maybe just above. So, he's obviously a really good option as well. There's no Grealish on here. It's got De Bruyne up there.
Yeah, Grealish was, I think, 12th or 13th on the list, okay. Which is just like a minutes thing.
Absolutely.
And just the value of guaranteed starts essentially, and it's the same when the last defender page. I think it was only Diaz, and he was like 10th. But Man City have probably the best defense in the league. Well, they do. Yeah, only one of the defenders is on there. Yeah, it just shows the value in players actually playing minutes.
Yeah, let's move on to forwards. No surprise, Haaland right at the top. I think everyone will probably have him by now anyway, or maybe not. I think if you're on the non-free hit strategy for 32, he's obviously not playing this week, so I think people look to get him back in 34, maybe, I think, or maybe even 33 versus Arsenal. But yeah, obviously he's right near the top. Kane's still right there, which I don't know. I suppose it was almost a little bit surprised by that, given the games are a little bit tougher. But it's Kane, so that's probably the answer. And then Isak is actually third, which fills me with a joy because that's more part of the reason I've got him. His minutes are at 69 there, so I don't know. I feel like in the double he is actually optimal captain. I looked at it already for 36.
Oh well, yeah.
Yeah, but that's based on the minutes as they are. I think the evidence we had so far, at least in the previous double, was that Wilson played one and Isak played the other. So I wouldn't be surprised. But I think if you don't captain Isak, you probably look into captain maybe Trippier, and then you're captaining a defender, which is slightly risky as well there. So I think still people will captain Isak even if they think he gets one and then a cameo, because he potentially could still outscore Trippier as a result of that. Watkins still being right up there surprises me, because I think their fixtures turn and most of us are looking to get rid of him maybe around.
No doubles as well. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. He's just he's obviously been brilliant, hasn't he, the last 5 or 6 games, but I just think he's just massively improved the season as well overall as a player.
I think he was really good the season before as well, where we thought it was gonna. I think he scored like 18 goals or something. Really, he looked like he was on the cusp of being a fantastic pick, and then almost had like a season off as a result of like Danny Ings signing.
Sorry, the season before last.
Yeah.
He's one of the ones that came through Brentford, isn't he? They sell on.
He's got everything he needs. I think I talked about it back then. He has been a frustrating player, and his finishing sometimes looks like it needs work, but he is literally like the modern centre forward.
Yeah,
like pressing, peeling off, mobile, can play out to the wide, like literally everything. His whole game, he is fantastic. It's only ever really been labelled that his finishing's been a little bit poor. Well, I think as a one, with his whole team's geared around him, he looks great again. But it could be a hot patch as well. He could then suddenly start trailing off a little bit. But yeah, I think he's got everything he needs anyway. Martial's one I want to talk about actually, because he is on the list down there. His minutes are at 59. He's one that I might actually genuinely bring into my team, because I don't have Rashford, do I? So I made the sale. Well, I've got Bruno Fernandes and I've got Shaw, right? And if Rashford's coming back, I've got Grealish and I've got Fernandes, who also double. So it's almost like I don't want to make that switch. So to gain the extra player, I could do Watkins to Martial around the time when Man United double, which I think is 34. If I think Martial doubles, which is a massive risk in itself. So that could be another way where I differentiate, is I go Martial instead of Rashford, which sounds ludicrously bad when I say it out loud, but it's potentially an option.
I just would not do that at all. He's just a bit like James for me in the sense. He's so frequently injured that it's not coincidence. He just is injury prone, and I just think it's inevitable in a few games he'll get injured again. I just think that's what his career is going to be like, sadly, because it's just been so consistent for so long that happens.
Bless him.
I know. And sorry, Alex has just asked, does that table think Tony is getting suspended?
Yes.
It's basically based on Tony's X-Men's gradually reducing, because we're expecting probably his hearings is this month. I don't think we know many details apart from it was going to be in April, and then based on previous cases, the suspension comes in straight away. So it seems quite likely at some point Tony's just going to we're going to get the news of Tony being suspended, but who knows? It is assuming that. Yeah,
it is, and Mbomo you can see is there, and Tony's better than Mbomo, so you can kind of manually adjust it yourself, and he would be somewhere in mid-table there, I presume.
Yep.
Yeah, so those are probably just the best pickups from now to the end of the season. It's a very short horizon, so obviously you have to bear in mind when people are playing and stuff in fixtures, but we're not going to go too much into that detail. Should we start answering some of these questions in the chat and Twitter before we head off?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, there's one question that we've already answered that was about Isaac. That was from FPL Baresi on Twitter. So thanks for asking a question. It was about the chances of Isaac being benched, which we've already answered. So if you listen to this now, go back and listen to that. This one's from Ines. Non-free hits. Got Trent in to get 10 outfielders, but is there a goalkeeper worth taking a hit for? Interesting. Would you take a hit for a goalkeeper this week?
So he hasn't got a goalkeeper? Is that what you're saying?
He's got 10 outfielders, but no keeper at the moment. But the keeper will be for a hit. So is there a keeper you would take a hit for this week?
I think I would do it because it's the old classic of it's only 2 points and potentially you could get more and it pay back for itself in that week, and it's a transfer you have to make anyway.
Yeah.
So I would bring in a goalkeeper. As to which one, I haven't looked myself, but I've gone back to the goalkeeper slide here, and Edison, Steele, Allison, Pope are all up there. Obviously, you're not going to do Edison this week because he doesn't play. Brighton don't play either, do they?
That's the tricky thing as well.
Yeah. So I think
because the teams that play now, none of them are doubling in 34.
Yeah, I think Pope or De Gea, if you can. I think Pope and De Gea make sense. I mean, Alisson's fine too. I just prefer the other Liverpool options. But those three that are on the screen there, Alisson, Pope, De Gea, I think all of those are fine.
Yep. The only other thing I'd say is if you've got another keeper who's you've already got Pope or De Gea, for example. I know wait, they're playing. No, they're not playing. Yeah, don't go for De Gea this week. They don't have a fixture.
We don't even know who's playing. It's not because the fixtures aren't up on screen. It's got to be Pope or Alisson, hasn't it?
But say you do have De Gea, for example, and your second keeper is, I don't know, Steele. You could do Steele to Johnston if you need money for future transfers. So take a look at your future moves as well, because there might be more value in going for Johnston, even though Alisson or Edison. Sorry, even though Alisson or like Ramsdale, for example, would be better for this one game week. It might be worth going for Johnston and then just having him as your sub keeper.
No, that's fair. I can see Harry, FPL Harry, in the chat as well. Hello, mate. I see a few names here. Colin Burglar. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
But I always call him Burglar. I know your name's not Burglar, but it looks like that to me, so that's what I'm going to say.
I don't know why Harry's listening to us. His rank's about 300 or 200 and something. Yeah.
God tier stuff.
Yeah, mad.
He's got to close it out though, Harry. No pressure, mate. Got to close it out.
Yeah. Get the job done. So one other question from FPL Zahar, who's also in the chat. Would you do Zinchenko to Van Dijk for a -4? He's already got Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold, so only has 2 Liverpool players. Zinchenko's confirmed out for this weekend, I think. So would you switch him to Van Dijk for a -4, knowing you'll have him then until the end of the season?
I think I would.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of the better pickups, as we just saw from the defender list back here. He's also probably the most likely to play both in the double. From even Trent's probably slightly at risk, I guess, in the double. Yeah, was previously. Arsenal's fixtures are generally pretty bad after this for a little while, then pick up. I think he makes it back. It's only 2 points, isn't it, if you're on 10? So, yeah, I think I'd do it.
Yeah, and I think it goes, we mentioned this a lot over the last few weeks because there's been a lot of doubles and blanks. Like in general, hits are undervalued by most people in doubles and in blank game weeks where you get an extra fixture. And a lot of people tend to be too prone to take them in regular game weeks. So, yeah, if it's a player for now until the end of the season, and if you think you're likely to bring in a Liverpool player anyway, which you probably will do because they're going to get another double. Like now's the time to do it, so you get an extra fixture on top of that, and then you can use someone else with use your free transfer something else next 2 game weeks.
The only thing I'll say on that is if you do that now, you kind of do make your bed, and then let's say I don't know, Gakpo gets injured or Nunez gets injured or someone like that, and then someone becomes a better pick, like Jota or something, or one of those guys suddenly becomes more nailed, then it's tricky to move to it. But I still think Van Dijk in isolation is a great pick, and that's obviously ifs, buts. Could, maybe. Diaz is also there, right, and could come in as well, so there's just too many options, I guess. Probably need 2 or 3 injuries to cement that.
Yeah. I would do it. Yep. We don't have any more questions on Twitter. Are there any more in the chat?
Yeah, I've got one here from Colm. Will Alvarez become an option in the double game week? Yeah, I talked about that before, actually. I think, for me, I may chance it. I may chance going with him instead of Martial. Just because they may end up playing similar amount of minutes considering how injury prone Martial is. I don't necessarily think so. Let me just go to the double. I think the game that is most likely to see Haaland rested at least will be the Everton game, because it's after the away leg of the Champions League. So they go away in the Champions League. We've just seen around the Champions League from Man City, they have rotated people. Clearly that team they played against Bayern, which was the same team they played in the first leg, is Pep's go-to team at the moment. You could argue Silva or Mahrez depending on the opponent, but I think outside that it's pretty cemented. Again, Ake got injured, so you'd expect Laporte to come in. But yeah, I think after the away travel from the Champions League is likely. Like, Leeds is possible as well, but I think Everton will be the game where you'll probably see minutes managed. And I still think Haaland could start that game. Like, I don't think we've seen it all season. You could come off, but you're probably going to get reasonable amount of minutes, and they're just great fixtures. And we know Alvarez can score well, so it just depends really whether you're willing to chance it. You're happy to accept cameos. You know, you could put him on the bench in some of the weeks that you don't want to, but across the double in 34. I do think it's a slight risk, to be honest, because I don't really see the need for him to play over Haaland in those games. Like Fulham and West Ham it is, isn't it, in 34? So aside from the games being relatively close proximity, I suppose you're probably getting him because you think he's going to get maybe 20 minutes versus Fulham, maybe 20 minutes versus West Ham, which could be all right. But I think if you're banking on a start, put it that way, I don't think it's nailed. Like, almost certainly not. And you're kind of stopping yourself getting another Man City option. But I don't know. For me, like him or Martial is my two options. I might be willing to risk it, but if you really want someone who's cemented and definitely going to play, then he's obviously not the answer, unfortunately.
Yeah, makes sense. We got another question from Manon, who has no free hit, so he's thinking of getting Eze this week. Not sure about his long-term prospects. What do you think about Palace's fixtures from 33 onwards, particularly 33 and 35? So presumably he's free hitting in 34. I've had a quick look. Personally, I wouldn't be as confident in going for him over someone like Maddison. I think might be a better option if you can afford him as well. Just because in 33 and 35, Maddison's got Leeds and Fulham, so I think he's a fine option. But I would prefer Maddison personally if you want a player with a good fixture now and in 33 and 35. He'd also be selling McAllister for him, which is quite interesting. I think there's definitely like rationale for that as well. If you think McAllister's going to keep playing in this more deep role, which he's been good in the last two games, or the last game, I can't remember if it was the last two games.
He got adjusted in the game, didn't he? When the is it Nsika? I can't remember how you say his name now, but little wonder kid came on. But yeah,
little wonder kid. He started playing more deep, so I would just do a bit of thinking into that and look into that. Ask some Brighton fans. If you think he's going to play more deep long term, it might be a really nice little way to then transition to a Brighton defender instead, for example. So that could work out well also. So I don't hate it, but I personally prefer Maddison over Eze if you can afford him.
Budget's around 5.5 million, so he's just quashed that for you.
I wonder if Eze's the best.
Why does he have to remove McAllister? Sorry, I lost trail of thought. I would just.
He's not on free hit, and presumably got 10 players. Maybe a Fulham player then, because you could get Andreas instead.
I'd go Andreas personally.
Fulham then play Leicester in 35, and in 33 they play and play Villa. It's not too bad. Yeah, Ramsey's got Fulham in 33.
I think they're all options, but I think Pereira's just absolutely fine. I think people were put off by his price tag, but
yeah, Pereira's the option then, I think there. It opens up your options as well. You have more money in case you need to use it. He's absolutely nailed and is on penalties at the moment. Well, he's on penalties anyway, I think, isn't he now, instead of Mitrovic? So I think we don't know that, but oh, okay. No, he's not taking one yet while he's been on the pitch, but Mitrovic kicked the last one onto his own foot, which doesn't bode well. Yeah.
Oh, I think Pereira just makes sense because he's so cheap and you can leave him there. But all the options you've discussed, Ramsey and Eze, are fine too. Like, the fixtures are great, especially for Eze. I'm just not particularly confident. Like, Eze is a great player; he's a fantastic option, and they're scoring goals for fun right now. The fixture's good, but I just don't know whether that continues. Like, he's never really shown that so far. And it's harder for midfielders. I know he takes some free kicks. But even the best free kick takers in the world, like Ward-Prowse, probably scored 2 or 3 a season. So I don't think you can necessarily bank on that. Yeah, I just think Pereira's the easy answer.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And yeah, do you have like a rank in mind for the end of the season, Luke? I think I might have asked you this last week.
Just try and win it.
Try and win it, yeah. Not ruled it out yet.
Not ruled it out totally. All I need is like Isak's 6 goals, and I'll be within touching distance.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I wonder if there was like a protest in a match or something, and the team just like let the other team just keep scoring continuous goals. I don't know in what context that would happen. I've just made it up. But say that happens, right? That you might win it.
If my luck evens out in one game, then I'm winning it. Put it that way.
Yeah,
It's been that bad. I'm just
if a
moaning.
player scores like 50 goals,
Yeah.
that'd be sensational. Do you know one thing I would love to happen in FPL is there's two things, like a popular goalkeeper to score. I've not, because I remember Alisson scored the season before last, but like no one owned him. Like I really want a popular goalkeeper to score, and I want to own a keeper who scores. And the other thing is, a couple of weeks ago there was a player on the bench that got booked, and I really want there to be a game week where that's a really popular player that's on the bench. Loads of people have them in their starting 11. Loads of people have got a really good first sub ready to come on.
You're a cruel
and then
bastard.
They get benched. They get booked while they're on the bench, and because they come in even though they played 0 minutes. I just think that would be so legendary for the game, even if it happens to my player.
Even if it happens to your player, okay.
Yeah, it'd just be so funny.
I'm sure it probably has happened in the past. There's probably been a bench player that's been sent off, and people have at least marginally owned him, but I just can't remember. But
I guess so. They're a keeper goal 6 points as well. That they need to increase that at least to 7. Well, make it 10 points.
I think what would be legendary this week if Johnston scores, it would be like literally the free hit keeper that no one else would ever have for any apparent reason, apart from if you're on free hit and he ends up scoring a goal or something. Would just be absolutely legendary.
Last night, Coventry equalised in the last minute against Blackburn, which is a huge goal, by the way.
He punched it in the net, didn't he, or something?
And he it went in off he bundled it into the goal, but it took the last touch off his hand.
Brilliant. No VAR, of course.
Which is hilarious. Yeah. Cool. We've got one more question. Should we quickly answer it?
Go
on. From Alex Micah. It says Henry as Enrico Henry, but I nearly read it as Henry.
Yeah, pick Henry. Question done.
Henry, Rashford, and Haaland. Sorry, Henry, Rashford, and Haaland to Salah, Trent, and Solanke for a -4. Or Rashford to Salah and Haaland to Jesus for free. Just trying to get my head around this. Rashford.
Second one.
Yeah, Rashford. Yeah.
I think you probably want Salah a lot. It's not ideal to sell Rashford now, but you pick up 2 very good options this week, and you could. I suppose you at least you need to be able to get Haaland back pretty quickly. That's all I'd say, and Rashford. But
yeah, as long as you've got a plan to get them back. But yeah, it's a really tricky one to answer. To be honest, without like seeing your whole team and having a bit more information. But my instinct says, but basically, if you do take out Rashford and Haaland, have a way to get them back. So
yeah, I really wouldn't want to go without Salah this week, to be honest with you. I just really wouldn't. That feels very scary. Nick said, if you're chasing, would you go for Neto over Johnston? I think that's absolutely fine. I don't think anyone here just thinks Johnston's like definitely going to get a clean sheet. He's just marginally the best keeper option this week on EV. So I think you can pick literally any goalkeeper. There's so much randomness in goalkeepers anyway. I think even the modelers are open to tell you that the modelling of goalkeepers is extremely tough. Clean sheets are a bit luck orientated in general, just because a defence can be fantastic and concede off of one shot. So it's hard to model that in the first place. And then saves are a thing of absolute randomness in games as well. So, I think you've got license to do pretty much whatever you want with your goalkeeper. I mean, any goalkeeper, even away from home in a terrible fixture, can just turn out a massive score. I know that goes for outfield players as well, but with goalkeepers, it seems to be relatively common that they're able to do that. So I think you just go with whoever you want. Don't think there's any issue there whatsoever.
So you say you've got Whitworth and Sam Johnston. There's a rationale potentially to start Whitworth and bench Johnson. The reason is that obviously the most likely
starts. He's almost back, I think.
Obviously, the most likely thing is that you get you just get Johnston's points, whatever. But if
he gets sent off,
Johnston was to get sent off, you don't get the red card points, and you get Whitworth coming in. And if Johnson gets injured, if that happens after 30 minutes, or if it happens before 30 minutes, you've still got the chance of a clean sheet. And also, if you get sent off, again, you don't have the minus points, but you also potentially have the chance of a penalty save straight away. But I remember having a conversation with, I think it was FPL Kiwi on Twitter, who's a big in the analytics community, and he said it's actually about 50-50, which one, whether you should do that or not. But so I just say it's probably
because it's probably more likely, well, not more likely, but you can get injured any time after that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No. It's more likely they get injured before, but they could get injured. They could come off after. And also, if your keeper
imagination running wild on the pod today, man.
Yeah, fair. So your keeper does come on after like 20 minutes for a red card.
Sam boring us to death with goalkeeper stories.
They'll probably concede straight away from a penalty. But anyway, I've done it before, and I had massive anxiety about it. Because I can't remember. It was like I can't remember who the second keeper I had was, but I think it was Iverson and Ward, maybe even this season. And I started Iverson, and I can't think which way round it was, but I was just getting so nervous that like Ward was in as soon as it gets past the 60th minute, you just get really nervous that the keeper's going to get injured, and everyone else is going to get the banked clean sheet, and you're going to have a stupid sub keeper coming on. So I wouldn't do it, but it'd be legendary if you pulled it off and then it actually happened.
You need a day off, man. You need a day off. Just go relax, just chill out, get yourself a chai latte, get yourself back in the sun.
Yeah, you won't be saying that when Whitworth comes off the bench and saves a penalty.
Well, make sure you tag me if that happens. Colm says, hit the like. Don't forget, people. Love that. Thanks for doing that for us. We've banged on enough, I think, at the end now. So, yeah.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint. Thanks a lot. Yeah, if you guys could hit the like, that would be very much appreciated. If you could share, comment on the YouTube for the algorithm. On Twitter, on the pod. If you give it a listen, then, it just helps us spread and pick up more audience to bore to death with goalkeeper stories. So thank you very much. When are we back, Sam? We're probably back next week, or I can't remember now.
Yeah, probably next week. There's a possibility I won't be able to do next week. But maybe you next week with someone else, or maybe just you, or maybe the week after.
Okay. Well, people send me applications if they want to appear. We can see what we can sort out. We shall catch you on the next one. It's a goodbye from me.
Thanks, guys. Captain Whitworth for his penalty save.
Good luck, everyone.